Hi, my name is Carol, and in this section we're going to talk about the best practices of how to prepare your gel and how to perform your SDS page. SDS page translates to sodium dodecyl sulfate polyacrylamide gel electrophoresis, aka your gel running. So there's actually a lot of tips that we can share with you to make sure your run goes very smoothly. And to tell you the truth, I didn't know a lot of them, and then I tried them out, and they really help. So let's dig right in. First thing, choose your molecular weight marker. When you're choosing your molecular weight marker, there's a lot of things to take into consideration. I know it seems trivial, they all should work, but actually there's a lot of things involved in choosing your molecular weight marker. First is, what are the sizes of bands that you need? Different markers have different proteins in them, and therefore different size of bands will show depending on the molecular weight marker that you use. Not only that, but they also differ in their composition. And because they have different composition, they have different compatibility with the type of gel and the type of buffering system that you use. You also want to take into account what is the type of detection chemistry that you're using. You want to make sure that that is compatible with your molecular weight marker, as well as the wavelengths that your imager can acquire, so that way you can easily estimate the size of your proteins. We also want to make sure that we have an even run where all of our lanes are running at the same pace. That's going to ensure that we don't end up with an artifact such as those smiley gels that makes us so unhappy. And there's a lot of different things that we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen to us. The first one is to fill your running tank all the way to the level that's indicated, covering the wells completely and forming a little meniscus. You also want to make sure that there's no leaks on your running tank, because that would really interfere with your run. Another important item on the list is to make sure our proteins are going to enter the stacking gel at the same time. And one of the things that are going to help us accomplish that is to make sure we have clean wells. Once you remove the comb, you want to get running buffer on a syringe and clean one well at a time to make sure you remove any leftover polymerization buffer. The polymerization buffer has different density and different general composition, which could really compromise the pace in which our proteins enter the stacking gel. If our proteins don't enter the stacking gel properly, we may end up with artifacts such as smearing or even warped bands, and we definitely don't want that. The other thing that we can think about is to make sure that we load all of our wells in the same volume and with the same protein concentration. So if you need to dilute samples, do that and load the same volume on every single well. If we want to have the same volume in every well, that implies that we don't want to have any empty wells. So if you have any wells for which you don't have samples that you have to load, just load them with sample buffer. Also, keep in mind that your molecular weight marker may need to be diluted so that it is in the same volume as every other well. However, be careful. Molecular weight markers can be sensitive to different agents, such as reducing agents or even the sample buffer. So read the data sheet so you're really comfortable knowing what your particular molecular weight can be diluted with. Typically, PBS works very well. We also want to make sure we avoid any cross-contamination. Imagine a scenario where your negative control is contaminated by your positive control. That could completely affect the final outcome of your experiments and your final conclusions. So let's make sure that doesn't happen. There's two things that can help you with that. One is reduce the volume that you're loading on each well. Typically, you never want to load more than 2/3 of the depth of the well. The other thing is, make sure the wells are fully covered in running buffer before you start loading, and that there are no little bubbles on your wells. So all of that is going to help reduce the chances of cross-contamination. Another cool little trick that I've learned is load your molecular weight marker last. The proteins on the marker are very abundant, and if you let them sit there for a while you load the other samples, they might start diffusing onto the lanes that are adjacent to where you loaded your molecular marker. To help prevent having issues with protein diffusion before the run starts, we want to make sure that as soon as all of the samples and the molecular weight marker are loaded, we immediately start the run. That's really going to avoid random migration, avoid having artifacts like smearing, or even those touching lanes that can make very hard for us to quantify our bands later on. Starting our run as soon as all the samples are loaded are also going to reduce the risk of cross-contamination in between the samples. All of these little tricks that we have just shared with you, even though they may seem simple, they're really going to help you have a nice even run where all of your lanes run at the same pace and you don't have issues with any sort of artifacts such as smearing and bubbles and things that we want to avoid. Now, there's still a few more things that we want to talk about, such as how to choose the percentage of your gel and have a good running buffer, and we're going to talk about those on the next lesson.